All right, we'll get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm marketing operations here at Smarty. Today's webinar is about what we've learned and improved on over the last year, and we're really excited to get started. However, before we move forward and introduce our presenters, go over the standard housekeeping items. Yes, this webinar will be recorded. We'll send a copy of it out to everybody who registered. So if you do need to step out, you'll be able to view the recording. It'll be in your inbox later today. That is also forwardable. You can forward that to anybody that you think would benefit or get a kick out of whatever we end up talking about today. To interact with our presenter and other audience members, feel free to use the chat and the Q&A features of the Zoom webinar interface. This will allow us to make sure that we're answering your questions, giving you what you're hoping to get out of this session. And it makes it a lot more fun also when the audience is participating. So please do use those features as you will. All right, our presenters today, we have Brent Francom and Jeffrey Duncan, two of our product managers with us today. And so without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you guys, Brent and Jeffrey.
All right, thanks, Andrew. Appreciate this time to be able to talk about some of the things that we've learned in 2023, and appreciate Jeffrey joining me, and apologize to him for not getting his face on the opening slide. So you can see him there in the video. So
that's me in the scuba gear. That's me scuba diving. Guy.
Yeah, that's right. So just a quick outline of what we want to cover in this webinar. So we want to talk about some of the trends that we saw in our address data in 2023, how many addresses we processed, some interesting addresses, and then some non-postals, what they mean and what you can do with them. We'll talk about some specific challenges that we see or encounter all the time with our addresses that come through, both U.S. and international. And then we'll talk about some breakthroughs or some things that we've improved in our addressing through 2023, and then we'll open up for general Q&A. And feel free to type in a question anytime throughout the webinar, and Andrew will interrupt and ask the question if it's appropriate.
No promises, Brent.
Okay, thanks. So what are some of the trends that we saw in 2023? First of all, I want to talk about how many addresses we processed and why this matters. So, we processed over 327 billion addresses in 2023. And that's about 896 million per day and 10,370 per second. So you could actually circle the Earth 36,138 times per day at 10,370 miles per second. And a more realistic example, it would take Santa Claus 54 hours to deliver presents to 2 billion addresses if he visited 10,370 addresses per second. So obviously he goes faster than that since he can do it one night. So and then 10,030 per second is about how many text messages my 16-year-old son sends out to his girlfriend. So why do these numbers matter? It's about what we learn and the knowledge that we can pass on to you, our customers. You can see alone in the US, we process 293 billion and 4.8 billion international addresses. And so there's a lot of things that come in that we gain understanding of, and how things are being formatted and how we can improve the output to you. One of the things that we get quite frequently in our data is interesting addresses. So we actually have up on our third floor in our building, we have a whiteboard that's called the address wall of shame, where we write out different addresses that are interesting or funny or malformed that validate. So a few of these I put here. The first one is 9250 State Route 56 with the secondary address of null.
That's the unit number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unit number. Which unit do you live in, Jeffrey?
Null.
Null. That's not confusing at all. And this one was my favorite one. 11 Go Away, Oak Bluffs, Massachusetts. you can only imagine the friendly people that live on that road, right? And then the road that my kids live on, 5625 Too Lazy 2 Road in Island Park, Idaho. So we encounter quite a few different interesting addresses that come through, as you can imagine. There was one that was talked about in a webinar last year that was 3 A-hole way in Alamo, Georgia. Someone really upset the postmaster on that street.
One thing to be aware of for those that may be wondering, yes, we know about all of these funny addresses. We know nothing about who's there,
Right.
what those
Exactly.
people are doing. We're just making assumptions here.
Yeah,
by the
good
way.
clarification. Thank you.
But working with addresses all day, every day, we have to come up for air somehow. This gives us a breather and it's funny.
Yeah. Jeffrey, tell us about non-postals.
Oh, you bet.
Non-USPS addresses.
Yeah, so we use those two terms interchangeably, non-postals and non-USPS. So any address that the U.S. Postal Service doesn't know about, or specifically doesn't, it's not that they don't deliver to, it's that they don't know about, because there are some addresses that the USPS knows about, but that they do not deliver to. Those would be rural areas where there's only PO box delivery, or even addresses that the Postal Service used to deliver to, but they've stopped for financial reasons or for whatever reason. So any address that is not in the USPS data, but is a real address, is what we consider it to be a non-postal. And that number is constantly changing because as the US, as a new home is built, the address doesn't exist in the USPS data yet, but it is a real address and people need to get their packages. But after a certain number of months, that address then filters into the USPS data and out of our non-postal data. But then, of course, new addresses are built. So we have about 20 million non-postal addresses. That's up recently from about 15 million last year. Last year. So the number is changing, but that's where it is right about now, about 20 million. Why is this useful? Well, if you're trying to reach your client, if you are a bank and a client comes to you to sign up for a credit card and they give you their address, just because they don't live in an area that is serviced by the U.S. Postal Service doesn't mean they don't have a real address. And you want to be able to say yes to them instead of no. So that's a great reason for having non-postals. It also enables us to have addresses that are, like I mentioned, are going to be in the USPS data, but aren't yet. So we're able to get them in advance. So we have non-postals and we have postals. The way that you access our non-postal data is through our enhanced matching process.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another interesting trend that we saw this year is industry-specific address formatting. So this one is in the healthcare industry, where they have an initiative that they call Project USA or Project USAT, depending on who you're talking to. But this is really an initiative with technical guidelines and standards to address the challenges in standardizing addresses in the healthcare industry. You can imagine the difficulty in sharing patient information across different doctors' offices, different hospitals that are on different systems. So the Project USA mission is to improve that accuracy and quality of patient addresses that'll allow that sharing to be more seamless and the patient identification to be more accurate. So you can see some of the changes that we've made to our Project USA formatting. So one difference is that between USPS and Project USA is that all the letters are capitalized. So you can see one King Street, Apartment 1, New York is all capitalized. Also, anywhere where highway is in the address, it's no longer abbreviated. It is spelled out and capitalized. Same with county, so any county road or interstate. So there's no nothing's confused about what those abbreviations mean. It's spelled out and very bold and yells at you.
Brent, can I jump in on that?
Yeah, please do.
One of the reasons so first of all, Project USA here is not returned by default. So if you're just using our system and if you're not interested in this at all, doesn't matter. You don't have to use it. You won't even get it unless you ask for it. You can imagine a hospital that is trying to identify two different patients. You have Bob Smith at 100 Main and Bob Smith at 100 Main Street. Great. If you get a human who's looking at that and they see both of those, if the city, state, and zip code are the same, they might say, yeah, this is the same address. And that's cool. If a human sees that, no problem. However, what if you're trying to do this in bulk? What if you're trying to do it or have a computer look at Bob Smith at these two addresses? The computer, unless you've got a really, really good programmer that has looked at all the possible matches, the computer's going to say, nope, it's not word for word identical. This is not the same patient. And some of that patient's history might not then be included when it's needed. So that's why the health industry had this initiative, and we jumped on board to make it easier for them.
We've got some people here in the audience that understand the value here, and they're wanting to know, is Smarty providing Project USAT then?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
It's
Okay.
already available.
And is that configurable to get the USPS format and or the Project USAT format, USA format?
Correct.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay.
By default, you get the USPS. If you submit a parameter asking for the US Project USA, you get that one as well.
Yeah. So it'll just be specified in the call that you want the Project USA format returned. Okay. So like I mentioned, we do have some challenges that we face, and everybody that deals with addresses deal with challenges in everyday working with these. So I'm going to turn the time over to Jeffrey to talk about some of the challenges that he's seen and how to deal with those.
Perfect.
Before you jump over there,
yeah.
really quick, if I'm purchasing the master address list, is it possible for me to get that in Project USA format?
It's not in master address list currently.
Okay.
But if you take that master address list and run it through our system, you can get that output.
That's correct.
And you can also work with one of our sales team because no one's ever asked us that, we can certainly work with you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so let me jump into some of our address challenges. The first one is address aliases. Alias, and this next one, LACS, which means Locatable Address Correction System. That is a completely US Postal Service term. So they have lax link. And the history of that, the Locatable Address Correction System, which I won't use that term again, I'll just say lax, was created by the US Postal Service to work better with the emergency responders. So picture a rural town where they receive their mail at the street on US Highway 89, but the house is 4 miles away on a named road, and the house has a number, but it's so rural that only a contracted USPS driver goes out there once a day and delivers at the box, and that's it. If a child calls in and says, this is my address, and maybe they only know their mailing address, how can an ambulance know how to get where they need to go? So that's what the lax system was created for, between the USPS and the emergency management services, to be able to know that box 35, Highway 89 in Birdseye, Utah, actually corresponds to 200 North, 500 West on this road. So that's why they created it. And for that purpose, it works well. The lax link has also been used by for other reasons to allow for renaming of streets, renumbering of streets. And this is interesting because it creates aliases when cities, so on the East Coast and in California, you've had cities that have been around for longer than in Midwest of the United States. And these cities were created without a grid system, and they were not necessarily numbered from the center of town outward, or sometimes there wasn't even any city planning on how they numbered them. So you might have house number 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 4 houses, on the same side of the road. Well, it's common now to have odd numbered houses on one side and even numbered on the other. How do you fix that? Oh, the city says, okay, we're going to rename this. Your house that used to be number 2 is now number 5. Wait, but how do I reconcile that? The USPS maintains a database, this lax database, that says that the old address was 3 Main Street. It is now 5, or 2. It is now 5. So we just generically call that an alias. So within our system, regardless of which address you put in, we will return the current address for that. An example would be here in the city where we live. There's a road that used to be called Bulldog Boulevard. There was a high school and their mascot was the Bulldog. Previously, that had a different name. It was 1320 North. The high school moved, and the local college took over that area, and that road is now called Cougar Lane. You could put in an address on 1320 North. Our system would return the matching address or the current address on Cougar Lane. So that's an alias. It's a good concept. It's important to have that so that cities can change, addresses can change. But it's also important for you, if you're working with addresses, to realize that when Smarty tells you that, yes, 100 Bulldog Boulevard is a valid address, look at the result and look at the footnotes that we return. If we say this was a lax link address, there's a reason why the input of Bulldog Boulevard was changed to Cougar Lane. So make sure you take a note of that. One way that we have worked on resolving that or making it more clear is that we introduced what we call the Smarty key. This is a persistent, unique identifier for each address. All of the previous addresses, previous aliases for that address, because they resolve to the final one, they all have the same Smarty key on that. So it's a unique ID for an address or for a location. We hit the next one, Brent, unless there's any questions. Oh, yes, the false positives. We don't have false positives. Never happens. Next slide.
Yeah.
No, we at Smarty, one of the most important obligations that we have, almost to the point of religious or moral, is to not return false positives. We would rather return a no match, complete failure of the matching engine, rather than return a false positive. False positives lead people in wrong directions. So with that in mind, just know that Smarty does not return false positives by mandate. And anytime we find some, because they do slip through, especially as new data comes in and old matching algorithms prove to not handle new data, we weed them out as quickly as we find them by monitoring or by modifying the algorithm. What is a false positive? Well, one simple example there you can see on the screen. If you put in 105th Avenue in New York, and if the matching algorithm says, cool, we found it, house number 5 on 100th Street, New York. Using the values in that input, 105th, it converted 5th to 5, and then swapped the house number with the street name. That would be the wrong address. The computer doesn't know that. Cool, it found a match. What if 105th Avenue doesn't exist, but 5 100th Street does? Cool, that's interesting, but that's not the intended address. And while sometimes we have clients that say, well, no, that's perfect. That's the kind of matching we want. It's way too aggressive. We don't do that. You won't find that kind of match here at Smarty. We don't have an aggressive mode that returns that for you to even choose from because of that mandate that we have of 0 false positives. So false positives come from being too aggressive on the matching. What do we do to prevent them? We are always looking for them. We look through the results of the addresses that we get, or input versus output. and we're looking for false positives. We have a number of ways to identify them. But the biggest way that we prevent them is by not creating them. There's that sweet spot between too aggressive and finding lots of matches and not finding enough. And we have fine-tuned that so that, sure, some addresses that you enter, you wish we could find it, but we won't. Where other ones, you'll be very surprised. Wow, how did they get that? One clear example of what we won't find, if you were to put in 100, 100, 100, 100, 100 Main Street, Provo, Utah, we're not going to match that one. There's too many 100s in there. Or if you put Provo in there a lot of times, we're not going to match it. Any questions on false positives?
Yeah, there's a question here. What if Smarty says an address is not valid, but the person says that they do in fact get mail at that address? Is there a way to update the Smarty record?
You can contact us and our support team will work with you to get that updated. The first way is to update that with the US Postal Service. And we have ways to contact them. If you do a quick Google search, look for AMS locator, USPS AMS locator, and that will give you the phone number for your local address management service with the post office. But if you contact our support team, they can help you get that updated. We do see those. That would be a false negative in this case. Okay.
Excellent. How frequently is the USPS data updated with Smarty?
Monthly.
Monthly. Excellent. We have a question about Smarty key.
Sure.
How is that different from the USPS unique key?
I'm not familiar with the USPS unique key. That is not present in the data that we have. If you are referring to the delivery point barcode that the USPS uses, that's based on a zip code, and the zip codes change. So that one, you should not rely on a USPS zip code, an 11-digit zip code, or a delivery point barcode can only be used as a unique identifier within the current month. As soon as the new data comes out, zip codes change, and plus 4 codes change. So if I've answered your question, I'm glad. As far as a USPS unique identifier, in 13 years, I have never seen one, but knowing how databases work, they definitely have one, but they don't share that information with us.
Sure. How or does Smarty match any records that have superfluous data? Or are there cases that it will? And how does it handle address data with ranges? For example, 100 to 300 Main Street.
Cool. Let me go backwards. 100 to 100-300. Our system does not treat that as a range. In Hawaii, that address would be perfect because 10-357 is the house number. It's not a range. In New Jersey, they have those addresses as well, and also in Queens. It would be nice, it would cost less for a user to be able to submit 1-1000 on Main Street and get all the addresses out. We don't do that. Sometimes people will enter 1-10 Main Street, and that means house number 1, apartment number 10. So if we can use that and find a positive match that's not a false positive, a definite match, then we will return it. Otherwise, we will only use one of those values, and it is the value closest to the street name. And what was the first part of that question? I just did.
I don't remember. Let's see.
Superfluous information.
Superfluous data.
Yeah. So if the address that you enter is 100 Main Street, Smarty is cool, Provo, Utah. Well, Smarty is cool is superfluous. We work to. Oh, it is true. Sure. We work to remove that first, and then return the match on just the address information. So that part will be stripped out and relegated to address line 2, or what we call extra data. So it's, let's say 100 Main Street, leave it under the mat, right? Or put it in the doghouse. That might be useful for the mail carrier, but not useful for a computer in trying to match an address.
Great. We have other questions, but we'll hold them to the end.
Okay. International addressing. Cool. So international, just when I thought I knew something about addresses, 6 years ago, Smarty introduced our international addressing system. And while I still don't know all of the 3-digit ISO codes for the countries, I know where to find them. So I've chosen to not memorize those. I'll hit this pretty quickly. International brings with it the same problems as USPS, or as, sorry, not USPS, US addresses times 240, because there's 240 addresses or countries that we support. First thing that I have on the slide here, max address precision. We have that, and for a country like India, the max address precision that our system returns is delivery point, meaning the actual house or building and apartment number. But what we've found is that there's not a whole lot of addresses in India where data is available at that max address precision. So we are releasing what we call the actual address precision. Name may change. We're going to release some of the numbers that we have. So based on the millions and millions of addresses that we've run in this country, this is what we really see. You're likely to get street level match or premise level match, even though the max is delivery point. Best way to input international addresses. Let me jump down to the bottom a little bit, or the next one, best practice. We definitely recommend getting the country first. If you have a web form, or if you're taking address information from a client, once you get the country, so many more things open up. For example, some countries don't use a postal code, so you can either hide that field or just don't show it. In every case, the cleaner the address data that you get from the client or from your customer and then present to us, the easier and the more consistent the match is going to be. But we do also handle free-form addresses. So free-form means the whole address in a single line, and we allow for that. That's exciting, especially with our support team. When someone gives us an address in a Chinese or in a foreign language, they don't even know if the address is right to left or left to right. So being able to enter that in free form and then clean it up is super useful. Maintaining address formatting, that's another challenge that we had. There are about 40 or between 40 and 50 different address format types across the world, and then variations of those. Each country can have their own address format. In Germany, they have the street name first and then the house number second. In Germany, you have Heinekener Strasse, 2 words or 1 word. They're both the same thing, but they're spelled differently and they're supposed to be written differently. So we have to maintain that. So all the address formats across the world, we have mastered, and as they change, because they do, we are able to update very quickly to handle the new address formats. So that's been a challenge that we've had with international addressing.
Okay, awesome. Let's quickly touch on some of the breakthroughs that we've had in 2023. First, focus on some of the new products and features that have come out. The first one that we're really excited about is our address enrichment API. This is a new API that's going to allow us to present or offer different data sets to our customers. So the first one that we came out with was our property data that is based off of the county tax assessor or county recorder data, and it's normalized and output in a way that's easy for anyone to read and to implement into their system. And this is based off of Smarty key. So we get that Smarty key that we talked about previously. That's a unique ID for a location. Send that Smarty key in the call to the enrichment API, and we'll send back all of the property data for that location. Another one that we released, it's been approved by Google just recently, is our Google Sheets plugin. If you have a spreadsheet full of addresses, you can implement our Google Sheets plugin. You click a button just to validate those addresses, and it'll spit out those validated address and standardized addresses in a new sheet. So that's a really cool tool that we are excited about. Another cool improvement we've made to our command line interface is the ability to specify rate limits. So if you're a current user of our command line interface, so previously if you're running a a big batch of addresses. It would take up all of your resources.
It would use as many possible lookups as it can on your account.
Right.
Yeah.
But this allows you now you can say, oh, I only want it to do 100 per second. So it's not taking up all of your computing resources.
So imagine you have a website that accepts new customer address input, and you're processing a large batch on the backside. You could allocate some of that so that the website doesn't have to slow down.
We've also released 2 new SDKs, Ruby and Rust. As a non-programmer, I don't know what those are. It's Dorothy and Mater, I guess, representatives of those SDKs. I'm sure somebody uses them. And then new tools in our account dashboard. We're continually trying to improve the offerings in our account dashboard. So our file upload tool now allows you to, where it was copy and paste before, now you can plug in an Excel file and see the output. And you can also upload up to 500,000 addresses in that tool.
Instead of 25,000.
Instead of 25,000. There's also a property data tool. So if you want to try out our property data address enrichment API, there's a new tool in there. We can give you some demo lookups to try that out. And then we've improved the single address tool as well, making that more user friendly. The next thing we've done is improved our master address list. So previously it only included USPS addresses that were in our database, but we now have license to include those non-USPS or non-postal addresses up to 20 million in the master address list offering. So that's cool. It allows you to expand your database and expand your reach a little bit. We've also added our census block code that allows you to uniquely identify the census areas that an address is in. So this can be used for various purposes, or market research, to gain insights around the demographics of a specific area, understand your target market, infrastructure planning. We have several telecommunications or utility companies that use Smarty. They can use that census block code to determine where to expand or upgrade their services based off of population density and demand. And then insurance and risk assessment. They can use that census block code data to assess the risks associated with different areas, factors like crime rates and environmental risks, and they can impact those premiums.
So much additional data is available from other parties, and they tie it to the census block. So having the census block code means that all the demographics from the Census Bureau, which is way more than anyone would ever want to look at, all of those can be tied instantly. Well, you have to grab that data, but you can tie it to this address because we're returning the census block code.
Okay.
Awesome. More international improvements. So again, we've been offering our international service for 6 years, maybe 7. And as more clients started to use it, that's awesome. We had to scale up to hundreds of servers. Our engineering team has recently made some dramatic improvements. Instead of hundreds of servers, we are down now to dozens of servers. Still the same robust processing system, very, very redundant, but we're only supporting dozens of servers across the country, and the latency has gone down. So fewer machines, less overhead, and better response time, so lower latency. That's awesome. We were really impressed when they announced that to us. And the numbers that they gave us, they didn't trust their own numbers, so they checked it lots of times and were really hesitant to tell us about the improvement because it didn't look like it could happen. So very happy to have that. Increased consistency. I mentioned this earlier. There's lots of different address formats across the country or across the world. We handle all of them. They're much more consistent now within the same country. Non-matched addresses. This one's really cool. For an international address that we can't find a perfect match on, we now are able to more consistently match all the components and keep the pieces of the address that were given to us, even though we can't find a match. So if it's a country that only has street level data and you still give us a house number, cool, we don't have to throw that out. It's still as part of the response. And you can see in the next bullet there, better handling of extra information in the addresses. On this first one, Avenida San Sebastian, 30, 4IZQ. A local might know that that means the fourth floor, izquierda, on the left. The system wouldn't, in the past, would throw that part out. The 40 IZDA is the abbreviation for it. So 40, it's not 40, it means 44th floor on the izquierda. So we keep that in there, even though the data that we have didn't match fourth floor izquierda, we're able to abbreviate it and utilize that. The command line interface, or what we call the CLI, and this is an application that you would run in the terminal or the DOS prompt, can just handle any size address list you've got. It doesn't matter whether it's gigabytes or megabytes. It can handle all of them. We've now added the ability to handle international addresses in that as well. So if your process requires a non-API access to run a list where you have it, where you're not running it in real time, the CLI is great for that. International autocomplete improvements. This one was fun because it took a lot of time. Enables search by postal code. So this is one that not everyone knows can be done. You look down below, I'll use that example. If you start typing in for an Italian address, if you start typing in 07037, right? So in the United States, we would treat that as a house number. Or it's 5 digits, so it could be a postal code. Our international autocomplete engine treats that as both. It could be either one. If you type that in, your immediate results or immediate suggestions are going to be just in that area of Italy. And as soon as you start typing in Via Vittorio, you're going to see that there's only 27 possible responses in that postal code. So this is the fuzzy matching, and as a result of that fuzzy matching, you can also search. You can begin your search with a postal code. Our system, we also now have unit data or subunits, also called secondary information about each address, not each address, sorry, about addresses in many countries. New Zealand's not on this list, but we have it there. So Canada, Great Britain, Australia, Germany, France, Spain, a lot more countries, we have apartment and secondary information, unit information there. And the biggest thing between our between our international address validation and our international autocomplete tool, they now are both pulling from the same address data set. Previously, it was, it had a lot of the same things, but it wasn't totally united. Now it is. So the same addresses that are shown in autocomplete are going to show up as valid when you validate them to get more information. So we find the addresses faster in autocomplete, and they're better addresses.
Okay, now we're happy to answer any questions that you have. We've got a couple in the chat. It sounds like Andrew's going to piece them out to us.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a good one. We've been using Smarty since 2014. Smarty's main use case seems to be to help us deliver physical mail. Our main use case for Smarty is to, one, verify if an address is real or at least plausible, and two, to standardize addresses for indexing, which helps with deduplication. Are these legitimate use cases for Smarty? Does that rank on our priority for use cases that we strive to support? Are these the kinds of things that we're finding most of our customers are doing?
Right. Yeah, I think that's kind of right in our wheelhouse. I think you can use our address verification for anything. It's not just mail. I think what you listed there, whether you have a giant database full of addresses and you just need to standardize it, you can use Smarty for that. That's a main use case. Or if you're doing it on the fly in a web form, that's also a main use case. So I think any time you need validation address validation. That's a main use case for Smarty.
If you need emotional validation, you can also reach
Yeah,
out to our
You
support
can reach
team.
out. Our support team is really
So
good.
validation and cleanup. So think of a company like Amazon. A lot of times, if I were to say that they're using our service, which I'm not saying, you might think, oh, when I type in my address, they are going to suggest that I mean this address, and that's how they use Smarty.
Yeah.
Well, cool. But how many times would they need that? Only when an address is being entered. And when I shop on Amazon, I use the same address every time. I don't keep putting mine in. So a company like Amazon might use our system to deduplicate.
Yep.
If they're doing a sale where they send out a free T-shirt, for example, if you sign up, one way to keep people from defrauding them and signing up to get lots of free T-shirts is to use a service like Smarty and say, oh, that's the same address. 100 Main Street with street spelled out is the same as 100 Main ST is the same as 100 Main. So deduplicating, just understanding the addresses. We don't just validate the addresses. We help you to understand as much as you can possibly get from about the address.
Sounds like you have experience in free T-shirts. Trying to get free T-shirts.
I was answering that for a friend.
Oh yeah.
Excellent. Okay, here's a question about our validation standards and how much we extrapolate. So let's say you have an address and 5 out of the 6 address fields are correct, but one of them is wrong or dirty. Does Smarty use the 5 that are good to find the 6th, or does Smarty say that field X is always more correct than field Y?
Good question. That one merits its own webinar, but I'll try it right now. Some fields, just like people, some fields are more important than others.
Give us the short answer.
The house number is always more important than the street suffix. If your house number is 123 and we match it up to 256, we did something wrong. If your house number, if the address that you give us is 123 Main Parkway in Schenectady, New York, and the only address in that city that has a 123 and a main is actually an avenue, we will deem that to be a positive match and return it. If you don't give us a house number, we will never infer a house number. If you misspell the street name, if we can positively identify that as an alias or as a known misspelling, we will match it. So we don't throw out an address just because all 5 pieces don't match, but some pieces of the address are more important. If you give us a bad zip code, but a good city and state, we will use that to infer the correct zip code, only if we find a match for that address in that location.
Great, thank you. There's another question here. I'm going to rephrase it as I understand the question. If this isn't your question, then please let me know. But does the US autocomplete deliver non-postals?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And the master address list also can deliver non-postals?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, next question. We are currently rolling our own address index using Smarty standardized address components for deduplication. Would you recommend switching to your Smarty key instead?
100%. Yes. One thing I didn't mention in the as I was talking about aliases, the USPS maintains it's almost a dark web list of aliases. So let's say the address is 100 Main Street, apartment D. The USPS also accepts that address as 100D Main Street. Wait, but that's the house number. That's a primary number. Yep. Our system realizes that is an alias for the 100 Main Street, apartment D, and it will treat it as an alias. Same address, same Smarty key, different variation on it.
Thank you. Okay, secondary information. Does Smarty primarily go to the USPS for secondary information, or do we leverage other sources? And I know that some of these we're going to hold close to our chest, but the question is, are we pretty much just USPS or do we have other information as well?
Both. USPS is one of the sources that we use. It's not the only source. It's right a lot of the times, and it's not right some of the times. So we have multiple sources to get that. That's the what I mentioned as far as the non-postal data, non-postal information.
Excellent. And then the last one we'll take today, does Smarty offer ERP integration in any capacity?
We can integrate with anything.
Yep.
Ours is a REST API. If you can send an HTTPS request, if you can send an HTTPS get or post request to a public API and then parse or accept a JSON response, then our system can be integrated very easily.
Great. Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us. We've gone overtime by a chunk. We appreciate you guys visiting with us today and listening to some of the things we've learned and changed over the last year. Thanks to Brent and Jeffrey for doing this webinar. If you guys aren't already using Smarty, even in a free capacity, you can get a free account and then 1,000 free lookups. Just go to smarty.com and give them a shot. And thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.